All right, we are in effect. It's been a minute. It's for our people with Dre Smith, Andre Smith, Smitty Bonton. July 10th, we are, well, my excuse anyway is that we are dealing with some new technology. So instead of just recording it on my laptop and uploading it to YouTube, we are now using StreamYard. So if you notice the logo up top, if you see the banner down at the bottom, we are stepping up our game. I am not a technology dude, so it's a little scary for me, which is why it took a little longer. So it's Friday. You know, we usually do this on Monday, and we're going to be back trying to do this on Monday, the 13th. But the switch to different technology, I had to get a little used to it. And so here we are for our people, repping for Hakim's Bookstore in West Philly, 210 South 52nd Street. And they're back in the store. Princess Yvonne, Princess Y, Chris Arnold, back in the store, right? I hope we don't get shut down again. But right now, 210 South 52nd Street in West Philadelphia. Matter of fact, that's what's great about these new graphics. The StreamYard is bow. There it is. There it is. So check out my peoples at Hakim's Bookstore. That's what we do here for our people. We talk about black books, talk about black scholarship. I am your host, Smitty Bonton, former law professor, spent 15 years in double AALS institutions. And so I find it's my job to bring the dope stuff from in academia and bring it out to the streets, bring it out to the people. So that's what we do here every week at For Our People. And again, we're repping, I am Andre Smith, but we're repping for Hakim's Bookstore. We want to save all the black bookstores so they not only survive, they thrive. As a matter of fact, now at the GoFundMe page, right, for Hakim's Bookstore so that we can make sure that we're moving along in the future. From what I understand, there's a nice spike in consumer spending when it comes to black-owned institutions, right? We want to keep that going. And as a matter of fact, we're going to end this talking about how every Black Friday should be Black Friday, not just after Thanksgiving, but that every Friday we should spend our money at black-owned institutions and businesses, or not at all, right? This one-day blackout thing, I think it's great. I think it's cool, but at the same time, I think we need to make it regular. So shout out to Black Lives Matter. Shout out to all the people that put together that economic withdrawal program over the last week or so. But I think we need to institutionalize this, and I don't mean to create an agency or some type of nonprofit that we both all can internalize this and spread it. That every Friday is Black Friday. We spend money at black-owned institutions or not at all. All right, either spread the wealth or build the wealth, one or the other. All right, so this week's episode, we're talking about black on black crime, or what is black on black crime. I see that now that is the latest in the past week. We see all types of memes and social media stuff trying to distract our attention from police brutality and reform and structural racism to pointing back at ourselves about black on black crime. So before we talk about black books, because that's what our goal is every week, but at the same time, we want to talk about something, bring black politics to the fore. So I'm going to talk about this idea of black on black crime. First, let's start with the fact that and I ask what it is because aren't we just talking about crime? Aren't we just talking about, and beyond crime, sin, right? And we're talking about why shouldn't we focus on sin, right, within the black community? Because again, black folks commit crimes against each other the same rate Latinos commit crimes against each other. White folks commit crime against each other. We live in black neighborhoods. White people live in white neighborhoods. And so white people committing crime in their own neighborhoods is white on white crime. And that's not even bringing in white collar crime and all that. So let me talk about this idea of black on black crime, right? So a real little statement right here. I just want to read this out real quick. And this is about the economics of crime and law enforcement. Again, I was a professor of law, but I also focused, my scholarship was on economics. You know, I talk about black businesses and all that here at For Our People all the time. Economic justice is my thing. Right after I shoot this video, we're going to do another video with the Economic Justice Law Review. You know, we do that every week. So let me talk about the economics of crime and law enforcement real quick. The murder rate goes up as poverty and inequality rises. That's a fact. The cost of punishment becomes relatively lesser compared to living on the outside in squalor, right? If poverty on the outside gets so bad that you can't eat, that you can't provide for yourself, then that makes jail, I'm not going to say more attractive, but less punitive, right? Again, folks used to talk back in the day about 3 hots in a cot. Beyond income inequality between rich and poor white folks, black people have to also take into account the racial wealth gap, right? Before we start to think of ourselves as naturally violent and inferior. Income inequality, if income inequality is bad, what about wealth inequality, which is even more debilitating? Even within the lowest income strata, median white families have 4 to 6 times more savings and home equity than similarly situated black folks. The difference exponentialized after taking into account the wherewithal of all your friends and family, right? So we know the murder rate goes up as poverty and inequality goes up. We also know that poverty amongst the wealth gap between poor people, black people, and poor white people, poor white folks have 4 to 6 times more wealth, right? And then multiply that by the number of friends and family you have when it's time to start a business. And that is why crime in black communities is higher than in other communities. It is not about being naturally inferior, and it's certainly not about not caring. So let me add the second part. The bottom line is that black people, black people black people have been protesting against violence every Sunday at 8 and 11 across the country ever since I've been alive. If there's one thing we know the hood does not lack for, it's churches. Right? So when we talk about this outrage, we know that every Sunday we talk about the violence in our community. We talk about the sin in our community. Saying black people don't care about safety in our own neighborhoods on social media instead of in the streets where it's happening is disrespectful and wildly hypocritical towards the many people who often without compensation at all sponsor and participate in anti-violence campaigns all over the country. Some people do it for free. Some people get paid to fight the violence. Some people put it in their songs. There's no lack of self-destruction songs. We're all in the same gang. And that's back in the day. I'm not going to play generational politics. We know that our young kids today put that in their rap music videos, the horrors of the hood and things of that nature. So I'm not buying into that. And C, if we can agree that violent crime is the product of poverty rather than innate pathology, then can we also agree everyone fighting for racial and economic justice also cares about black on black crime, right? So that's all I'm going to say about that. When I see these memes go across, if you're on my friends list, I'm going to make that point to you that we have outrage and we protest black on black crime every Sunday in churches, right? And you might not see me there, but you see a lot of folks every week. We don't lack for churches. Not only that, we got anti-violence programs. We got people in the schools. We got volunteers. You got people who have a nonprofit. You got people whose jobs it is. We got all types of activists of all types. This idea that we don't care of black and black violence is can't. But what can we do when we know that you can only take a young boy or young girl so far and talk to them when their economic status is that dire? People don't. So we're gonna leave that there. We're always going to say a little something, try to uplift the community, get this, correct the misinformation or the disinformation that's out there on social media. I guess that's what we're trying to do week to week, right? So what we do in academia, that's what we do in the streets, right? Try to come up with correct, truthful information, all right? So what is black on black crime? I don't know, but right now I know it's a distraction from attacking structural racism All right, and most specifically, my concern is the racial wealth gap. So all these symbolic overtures, we're still not seeing a reassertion of affirmative action. We're definitely not seeing reparations. We're not seeing a reinvigoration of labor unions. We're not seeing white people commit to higher taxes, right? And that's a very much linked to police brutality, because they're going to get that money and squeeze it out of somewhere, and that's fining and giving us fees and all types of collateral context when they arrest us, and civil asset forfeiture and whatnot. I'm not saying a reinvigoration of the Voting Rights Act, the repeal of Shelby versus Holder. In the last 4 months, we know that the Byron Allen case came down against him, right? I'm not seeing anything about Joe Biden. So these symbolic overtures are nice. I understand that there needs to be a feeling of inclusion. We also have to set the norm against racism as a viable or legitimate construct in order for us to feel comfortable in participating in this market. So I'm not saying what's going on is nothing. However, it is inclusion. It is not justice. Right? All right, so I'm going to leave that there. Again, we're back in the bookstore, Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street, West Philadelphia, between Walnut and Chancellor. Get that free parking on on Chancellor or Locust. Right, we give enough money to the city, as we were just talking about. Shout out to Muhammad El Muhajir. Thank you for inviting me to that program on Blackzit that we just did last Saturday on July 4th. Shout out to Marvin X. Shout out to Aaron Ransom Ofari, an expatriate living in Ghana, letting us know that it is all possible. So as much as we have a struggle and a fight here in the United States, understand that number two, it's white supremacy is a global construct, and we can fight it here, or we can fight it with our brothers and sisters over in Africa or South America or whatever. You have options. The world is yours, right? Shout out to Nazia Jones. Shout out to Ed Roseman and his wife, Ebony Roseman. They are the promoters of Black Kids Swim. I want to promote something that they're doing with a race at Gorée Island in Senegal. I was just talking about this link between African Americans and Africans. We need programs other than safaris and whatnot. Let's go over and have fun. Let's go have festivals. Let's go party together. Let's be real. So Ed Roseman, Ebony Roseman are the promoters of BlackKidsSwim.com. Say it again, BlackKidsSwim.com. Go check them out online, and they have a project, a web series, and they need some funding. So go check their GoFundMe page out and promote them so they can do this web series and send a bunch of kids over to Senegal, Africa to participate in what I believe it's a 3.5 mile race from Gorée Island, which was one of the slave castles, back to the mainland. And there's Senegalese that participate, there's Europeans and all that. Nobody's scared of going to Africa except us, I guess. Now, I know we got to wait for this COVID thing to finish, especially since as Americans, we're not allowed. The rest of the world don't want us and our non-scientific respected selves out in the rest of the world. But whenever we can, that is a project I definitely have affection for the promoters and want to see become successful, right? Gorée Island, BlackKidsSwim.com. Y'all ready to talk about some books? Let's talk about some books. And one thing that we're going to do, the reason I switched over to this format is because very soon, hopefully, maybe not the next go around, but what we're going to try to do is start inviting these authors to come check us out. That's what this platform allows for us, that we can bring some any one of these artists, and I believe just through an email, send it out to them, invite them, tell them that we're going to talk about your book today. And if you want to give us a shout out, give us a flash on the cover, tell them we get it, what inspired you and all that, we're going to be able to do that for our people. So hopefully this is one of the last weeks before I do this by myself, and that we can bring other people in here with us. All right, ready for the books? Book number 1, Contagions of Empire. All right, and we get a little thing by the bottom, right? Contagions of Empire by Carrie Arande Polk. Carrie Arande Polk is a young scholar at Amherst. The subtitle is called Scientific Racism, Sexuality, and Black Military Workers Abroad from 1898 to 1948. Interesting. Here's a piece from the book. From 1898 onward, and folks know, again, this is me interjecting, and I believe white supremacy was at its peak in 1901, right? And so what we're seeing now as far as the whittling or the dismantling of global white supremacy, even if it's not as perceptible here in the United States. Again, we got to understand the whole world's global politics. We understand that white exceptionalism is on the wane, right? China's moving up, Africa's moving up, even South America and all that. So I just wanted to put this in context about the time period. We're talking about the time period 1901 or 1898, when white supremacy is even in greater effect than it is now. All right, from 1898 onward, the expansion of American militarism and empire abroad increasingly relied on black labor, even as policy remained inflected both by scientific racism and by fears of quote-unquote contagion. Black men and women were mobilized for service in the Spanish-Cuban-American War, under the War Department's belief that Southern blacks carried an immunity against tropical diseases. Later, in World Wars I and II, black troops were stigmatized as members of a contagious venereal race and were subjected to experimental medical treatments meant to curtail their sexual desires. Remember the Tuskegee experiment? By turns feared as contagious and at other times valued for their immunity, black men and women played an important part in the U.S. military's conscription of racial, gender, and sexual difference, even as they exercised their embattled agency at home and abroad. By following the scientific, medical, and cultural history of African American enlistment through the archive of American militarism, this book traces the black subjects and agents of empire as they came into contact with a world globalized by warfare. Interesting book. And it's timely for the 4th of July, although I really wish I would have spoken about this book around May 31st or 30th, around Memorial Day, something that we definitely would have been very well received at that time. All right, Contagions of Empire by Carrie Ronde Pope. Again, if you like any of these books, call the bookstore, right, and order them from Hakim's Bookstore, or go to the website, order from the website. They're on Instagram, on Facebook, etc., etc. Hakim's Bookstore, second oldest black bookstore in the country. Did you know that? Since 1959. All right, next book. 5 Days. Oh, this is a good book. I really want to talk about this because I'm only 2 or 3 degrees of separation from Brother Wes Moore, who was married to an alumnus of the University of Maryland at the same time I was there, Dawn Blythemore. Shout out to the Moores. 5 Days, The Fiery Reckoning of an American City by Wes Moore. Moore, along with journalist Erica Green, tells the story of the Baltimore uprising both through his own observations and through the eyes of other Baltimoreans. And this is written in reference to the riots after the Freddie Gray incident and the treatment that the black police there, or the police, did not get. Partey, a conflicted black captain of the Baltimore Police Department. Jenny, a young white public defender who's drawn into the violent center of the uprising herself. Tawanda, a young black woman who'd spent a lonely year protesting the killing of her own brother by police. And John Angelos, scion of the city's most powerful family and executive vice president of the Baltimore Orioles, who had to make choices of conscience he'd never before confronted. So this is about a brother. Well, again, I think if you recall his previous book that he was very, very critically acclaimed was called The Other Wes Moore, right? Trying a brother who was incarcerated, and Wes looked at his story and why did this guy's life turn out so much differently than my own, right? A way to really humanize what's going on in these streets, right? We sloganize these and we politicize them, but shout out to Wes Moore for humanizing them. 5 Days, The Fiery Reckoning of an American City, right? All right. Well, how about this next one? We're going back way back into history again. I should have done these 3 together. Uncontrollable Blackness: African American Men and Criminality in Jim Crow New York by Douglas J. Flo, University of North Carolina Press. Early in 20th century early 20th century African American men in northern urban centers like New York faced economic isolation, segregation, a biased criminal justice system, and overt racial attacks by police and citizens. Drawn from voluminous prison and arrest records, trial transcripts, personal letters and documents, and investigative reports, Flo opens up new ways of understanding the Black struggle for freedom in the 20th century. By uncovering the relationship between the fight for civil rights, Black constructions of Black masculinity, and lawlessness, he offers a stirring account of how working-class Black men employed extra-legal methods to address racial justice. Uncontrollable Blackness. Interesting, by Douglas J. Flo. All right. So we're talking about Jim Crow era there with crime. We talked about contagions of empire, talking about Black militarism, 1898 to 1948. And here we have another piece from that time period, the Brownsville, Texas incident. We've talked, I know a lot's been going on about Wilmington, North Carolina. A lot's been going on about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the Greenwood District. About the Elaine massacre in Arkansas. Well, how about the Brownsville, Texas incident? There we go, hold on. The Brownsville, Texas incident of 1906, the true and tragic story of a Black battalion's wrongful disgrace and ultimate redemption by William Baker, a Black battalion. So now we're going to mix it together. Not only did we have Black militarism, not only did we have tragedies here, mix them up, right, where Black folks were unjustly punished while after coming back from war, after fighting for the United States. Watch this. In 1906, President Theodore Roosevelt summarily discharged 167 Black soldiers of the 25th Industry without honor, without trial, and without due process. It was the only instance of mass punishment in the history of the regular U.S. Army. The men were, in fact, innocent of any wrongdoing in what became known as the Brownsville, Texas incident. Yet they had to live the rest of their lives with the shame and disgrace leveled upon them. In his memoir, The Brownsville, Texas Incident of 1906, Lieutenant Colonel Baker tells the story of his quest to unearth the powerful and compelling evidence that would eventually exonerate those falsely accused men and give them the justice that had eluded them for more than 87 years. Wow. All right. So this is from Lieutenant Colonel William Baker, right? Interesting. This is a memoir of his to recall this incident. Interesting stuff. A few more books. Again, all of these books also, again, not only can you get them from Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street, beautiful West Philly, West Blackadelphia. All these books come from the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education's weekly book digest. Shout out to the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, JBHE, that puts out this book list each week. A couple more came out this week. The Golden Apple by Edgar J. Riley, Changing the Structure of Civilization, Volume 3, The Aftermath. I have to say, Edgar J. Ridley's work is self-published and very, very deep, a little beyond my comprehension, even just for this book. It is a book about psychology. It is a book about repairing the Black mind, or books, as he says, Volume 3, right? And it's very interesting. Although I'm not familiar with the brother and his work, it's very, we can't discount works like this, because we know that the Neely Fullers of this world, writing in 1971 and self-publishing the United Independent Compensatory Code, turns into the 80s of the ISIS papers with Francis Cress Welsing. And then 30 years later, we see that Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist is clearly from that lineage. It clearly is lined out all the way from the beginnings of Neely Fuller, just even from the idea of tasking your life against racism, from the idea of having a workbook about it. Again, shout out to the brother Kendi, but at the same time, the roots of some of his work is very obvious. So shout out to all the independent writers. For all we know, Edgar J. Ridley for next 30, 40 years could be a household name. This book describes how symptomatic behavior and the dynamics of symbolic behavior is the cause of how genes operate in our bodies and how they express themselves in who we are and how we behave. Right? So he's talking about the link between the mental and the genetic, right? A very, very unexplored topic, especially when we talk about racism, we talk about the myth of black inferiority, we talk about the slave mentality and all these things, and how it get passed from generation to generation. And this argues that it's not just culture, but culture then affects genetics. Interesting stuff. I wish I had more of a science background to tell you how dope it is, or on the other side, but I don't. So I will trust that you all out there, some of you have that science background and can break it down. All right, the last book for this week, the magnificent Reverend Peter Thomas Stanford, Transatlantic Reformer and Race Man, edited by Barbara McCaskill and Sadana Serafini, University of Georgia Press, very serious press. Born into slavery in Hampton County, Virginia, orphaned soon thereafter, and raised for almost 2 years among Native Americans, the charismatic Reverend Peter Thomas Stanford, 1860 to 1909, rose from humble and challenging beginnings to emerge as an inventive and passionate activist and educator who championed social justice. So those are our books for this week. Right, we talked about Black on Black Crime, and then we talk about our Contagions of Empire by Carrie Arande Polk, 5 Days by Wes Moore, Uncontrollable Blackness by Douglas Flo, The Brownsville, Texas Incident of 1906 by William Baker, The Golden Apple by Edgar J. Ridley, and last but not least, The Magnificent Reverend Peter Thomas Stanford by McCaskill and Serafini. So that's it for our weekly book talk. We'll be back again in 3 days. We're going to do this again on Monday. This was fun. I like these banners and whatnot. We're going to do some stuff with this. So shout out to everybody that is joining us, will join us. And I just want to remind you again, that blackout, that black economic stuff was great. But let's turn every Friday into Black Friday, right? Where we shop and only spend our money only at Black-owned businesses and institutions, or not at all. Let's always better educate ourselves and our children. Start and patronize Black businesses. Stop unduly criticizing each other. Let's accumulate human, social, political, financial capital. That is the revolution that will never be televised. See you next week. Hope you